everybody, I'm Lauren. I'm a buyer here at the Boulder Bookstore, and this month we're spotlighting local authors. So I volunteered to come in and talk about one of my favorite authors, Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen is an extremely popular New York Times bestselling author who turns out a crazy prolific quantity of books. He comes out with like 2 books a year. So if you look him up and you're interested in getting started on his books, you're going to find an overwhelming list. So what I thought I would do today is talk about a few different what I think are good entry points into Stephen's oeuvre, if you will. So the first one I want to recommend is The Only Good Indians, which is this book here. This, I think, is the best overall introduction to Stephen's work. It is, in some ways, the most literary of his books. He does write a variety of different types of horror and thriller novels. And this one is a kind of a direct, like paranormal horror thriller story. But it has some really interesting social commentary, some really, really beautiful writing, and it will genuinely scare the pants off you. The first time I read it in the mid-afternoon, full sunlight, and still when I finished it, I had to walk around nervously, checking around doors before I went into other rooms in my house. It's a really great book that also has a really moving coming of age story about a young Indigenous teenage girl who is kind of dealing with her complicated relationships with her parents and just her general struggles as a young woman. So it's a great one, and it's a great starting point. However, if you are nervous about having the pants scared off you and don't necessarily want to spend your entire day flicking lights on in your house nervously, I have a different proposal. This book is Mongrels. This is another one that has some of Stephen's characteristic elements of his writing, which is the social commentary, the discussion of Indigenous issues, of class and race in the United States. And it's also about werewolves. It is not nearly as scary as his other writing. It is still horror, and again, it's about werewolves. And there's definitely some violence and gore, but it's not scary. There's no point where you, as the reader, are nervously looking around in the room. I also really love it because it has a lot of humor. It's it's not a light read, but it's a quick one in that the pacing is really kind of continuously high paced. And it's just like a fun, enjoyable book. And also there are characters in it who will kind of live in your head forever. I think the family who are the centerpiece of this are just really incredibly well written. If you are a person who likes horror, and specifically if you like slasher movies, I cannot recommend enough this book, My Heart is a Chainsaw. This is the first book in a trilogy called the Indian Lake Trilogy. I saw someone online a couple years ago refer to this book as the great American slasher novel, and I think they're right. I think that this book encapsulates everything that there is to love about that genre, and has a final girl protagonist in Jade Daniels who is just so dear to my heart and to those of a lot of other people who have read the books. Every time we have an event with Stephen, we get people showing up in homemade Jade Daniels t-shirts. It's really great. And so this book is fun for someone who is already a fan of the genre, because this kind of thesis, I guess, of the book is that Jade, our teenage protagonist, is obsessed with slasher movies. I spent this book, and I've seen a lot of slasher movies. I spent this book, taking notes, of obscure ones I had never heard of that she talks about. So it gave me a film list as well as it being a great book. So if you're a person who enjoys lots of clever little references to movies you've seen, or enjoys kind of puzzling that stuff out, this is a really great one. And the trilogy, I think it works on its own, the first book, as just a novel. But I think if you read the whole trilogy, you really get more out of it in watching Jade's journey as she grows and gets older and kind of figures herself out. In the end, it actually ends up being really, really heartwarming because you get so emotionally attached to Jade and you just want the best for her. But there are instead serial killers constantly invading her small town. So that's My Heart is a Chainsaw. And then I want to talk about my very favorite of Stephen's books. This is Mapping the Interior. This is a novella, so it's a lot shorter than any of the other ones I've recommended. If you want to kind of dip your toe in, but you don't want to dedicate several days, this is a book you can read in an afternoon. The reason this one is my favorite is that it is so really, really emotional. This book was really creepy. It did definitely freak me out, which is a bonus in my eye. But also, it emotionally devastated me. I finished this book and I was crying I had to call my mom and say, hey, like, how you doing? Just to check in. Because it's about a young boy who has a single mom and a younger brother he's responsible for taking care of, and is being haunted by what he believes is the ghost of his father. And it really touched something in me. It's a really powerful story about family and, what we owe to the people around us and how we relate to our memories and our pasts and our families. And so it's a really beautiful book that I think packs an incredible punch for how brief it is, and is just one that's very, very dear and important to me personally. Finally, if all of that still sounds intimidating, I have an additional proposal for you, which is Stephen also writes comic books. This is the first volume of Earth Divers, which is Stephen's historical horror series, I guess. Each one takes place in a different time period. The thesis is that a group of indigenous teenagers in a post-apocalyptic, post-climate change kind of world discover an ability to go back in time and, as the title implies, decide to kill Columbus in order to prevent the colonization of the Americas and hopefully the development of all of the parts of modernity that led to the apocalypse. Obviously, this doesn't work out for them quite the way they'd hoped, as there are more volumes in the series, but it's a really fun adventure. If you're a graphic novel person, I highly recommend it, not just for the writing, which is excellent, but for the incredible art, which is by Davide Gianfelice, I think I'm saying that right, who's an Italian artist, which is pretty funny because it's a book about killing Columbus, a famous Italian man. But it's just a really great example of a graphic novel where the writing and the art work together really beautifully to tell a story. It's also just got some really, really cool ideas and cool images in there. So if you are nervous about going all the way into a novel, maybe give Earth Divers a shot. So yeah, that is my suggestion for if you are interested in getting into Stephen Graham Jones, but intimidated by the length of his backlist. Those are my suggestions for good places to start. I also think you can't go wrong by just picking a book at random and going for it. Stephen's writing is, has an energy and kind of a propulsiveness to it that makes everything I've ever read by him extremely compelling. It's really easy to just get lost in the characters' heads. The way he writes the narration is very how people think. And so you find yourself just kind of immersed in the story in a way that not all authors can achieve, and I think is one of his real strengths. So if you haven't already given Stephen a shot, this is a great place to start. Thanks.